Hello and most welcome to 1794 of the Heidegger series. We will today start a new article by Luke Davies from the University of Toronto. Aspect perception and understanding the meaning of words in Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations. Yeah, that's better. In part 2, section 9 of his philosophical investigations, Ludwig Wittgenstein asserts that a proper grasp of the concept of aspect perception can elucidate issues surrounding understanding the meaning of words. In this paper, I will seek to defend Wittgenstein's view. I will do this by first briefly explaining the nature of aspect perception. Then I will explain Wittgenstein's account of how we understand the meaning of words, and show why aspect perception can further our understanding of this process. Finally, I will address two objections to the view. Aspect perception. As presented by Wittgenstein, is primarily concerned with a visual experience of different aspects of a picture. Aspects here should not be taken as characteristics of the image. Instead, there are different ways of perceiving in the sense of visual experience the same image without that image physically changing. That is, aspect perception is the experience of seeing as. To properly understand what this means it is helpful to consider the example of the duck rabbit, presented first by Joseph Jastrow in Fact and Fable in Psychology, and popularized by Wittgenstein in Philosophical Investigations, can generally be held to demonstrate the aspect switch in aspect perception. As the title of the image suggests, the picture can be seen as either a duck or a rabbit. Due to the fact that most people, though not all, see the picture alternatively, first as one aspect, then the other. It is correct for us to say, I now see it as a duck, now as a rabbit. If, however, a person were only able to see one of the aspects of the image, the duck, for instance, then it is inappropriate to say, now I see it as a duck. This is because there would be no change to which the now I see it as would refer. We would only say it is a duck. We can change a bit more seldom. I think we can actually make the text a bit smaller. It's rather big this time. 150, for instance. That's better. So the expression of aspect perception requires an ambiguity in the perception of the image being considered. If a person does not notice the ambiguity in the picture of the duck rabbit, then the expression "it is a duck" is one of ordinary perception. The ambiguity is important to the ways in which aspect perception elucidates the issues concerning understanding the meaning of words. We can now understand Wittgenstein's saying that the expression of a change of aspect is the expression of a new perception, and at the same time of the perceptions being unchanged. While this phrase may appear contradictory, the discussion above illustrates that the two instances of perception here differ. The first use is that of aspect perception, while the second is of ordinary perception. So aspect perception is the change in visual experience caused by the dawning of a new aspect of an unchanging perception. The criteria for knowing that someone does in fact see the different aspects of an image are based on what Wittgenstein calls the fine shades of behavior. These subtleties, intonation, phrasing, prosody, etc., express a familiarity that comes from not just understanding that the image can be used as multiple things, but from actually seeing it as one thing and then another. Two, understanding the meaning of words. The meaning of a word for Wittgenstein is governed by the set of practices for the use of that word in a language. As understanding is a rule-governed process, to understand a word is to be able to use it properly over an extended period of time, according to the rule or rules that govern it. A rule for Wittgenstein is a standard that governs a practice. Where practice should not be taken as a single action, but rather as an institution. Rules can take various forms. For example, in the case of games governed by rules, a rule can be an aid in teaching the game, an instrument of the game itself, or neither in the teaching nor in the game. This is due to the fact that depending on the situation, any number of different rules may be needed to appropriately address the practice in question. Here, it is helpful to consider the difference in rules of a game and rules of etiquette. We accurately describe both as rules, but they inform very different practices in different ways. So we can rightly say that we understand the meaning of a word only when we have correctly used it over a period of time. That is to say, the criteria for understanding a word is consistently correct application. This does not mean that we need always apply the rule correctly. Every attempt at use contains the possibility of misapplication. Wittgenstein calls the aggregate of these different rule-governed practices language games, which he feels constitute language. He says we see that what we call sentence and language has not the formal unity that I imagined, but is the family of structures more or less related to one another. It is important that we are conscious of the fact that understanding the meaning of a word requires correctly following the rule of the appropriate language game. Three, aspect perception and the understanding the meaning of words. The connection between aspect perception and understanding the meaning of words for Wittgenstein comes from the fact that he believes that in certain cases we experience the meaning of words. That is, there are ambiguous cases in which one word can mean several different things. And we, in understanding the word, take its meaning as such and such in a certain case. The similarity to aspect perception should already be apparent. In cases where a word has more than one meaning, Wittgenstein uses till as an example. We can experience a change in the meaning of a word in the same way as we experience a change in aspect of an image. This connection can be seen more clearly, I believe, through a comparison of what Wittgenstein calls aspect blindness and what I will call meaning blindness. In his discussion of meaning blindness, Wittgenstein begins with a question: could there be human beings lacking in the capacity to see something as something? And what would that be like? With respect to our example above, a person with aspect blindness would not be able to see the duck rabbit as either a duck or a rabbit, but only one of the two. This would be the case even in different contexts. For example, it would entail that even surrounded by pictures of rabbits, the aspect blind person would only be able to see the duck rabbit as a duck, even in this context. Otherwise, this could not very well be called a sort of blindness. So aspect blindness could be a condition characterized by a person's inability to see more than one of the different aspects of an ambiguous image. Similarly, meaning blindness would be a condition in which a person would not be able to understand more than one of several possible meaning aspects of a word. In the case of the word till, we can, though perhaps with difficulty, imagine a person who could only understand it to mean cash drawer or something equivalent. In this case, the ambiguity in the meaning of till would go unnoticed by the person with the meaning blindness. This again would be the case regardless of the context in which the word was uttered. We are now in a position to see the ways in which aspect perception assists in our comprehension of understanding the meaning of words. Assuming that we do not have meaning blindness, there are certain cases in which we experience the meaning of a word with the same ambiguity that we perceive images, such as a duck rabbit. That is, a word can cause the same type of alteration between meanings as some images cause in visual experience. It is only with the same familiarity, as mentioned above, with the word in question, that a person will be able to understand what it means in the context. However, this is not the primary issue concerning the understanding of words that I would like to demonstrate can be explained by aspect perception. This is due to the fact that different language games and therefore different rules can apply to different meanings of a word. Understanding the meaning of the word then would have less to do with aspect perception and more to do with the correct application of the rule or rules. We can see aspect perception as being more useful for explaining two more difficult to comprehend phenomena in language. Namely, idiosyncratic uses of words and construction of metaphor. First, in the case of idiosyncratic uses of words, we must distinguish between primary and secondary senses of words. If I say, as Wittgenstein does, that Tuesday is lean and Wednesday is fat, I have employed a secondary sense of lean and fat. Ought I really to have used different words? Certainly not that. I want to use these words with familiar meanings here. For I could not express what I want to say in any other way. In this sense, the idiosyncratic uses of fat and lean here are not metaphorical. However, we would be unable even to consider what Wittgenstein means by the phrase Tuesday is lean and Wednesday is fat. If we did not first know the common meanings of fat and lean, Wittgenstein says that it is only if the word has the primary sense for you that you use it in the secondary one. Figure 2, a triangle, appears to us univocally as a triangle. We can take this as its primary aspect. It is possible then to see it as something that has fallen over. The answer to this, it would seem, is yes. The difference, however, is that we have to imagine or interpret that it is something that has fallen over. We did not automatically see it in that way. We can, however, take this as one possible secondary aspect of the triangle. We can see that the triangle aspect is primary, because we cannot fail, if we know the language, to see the triangle as a triangle. Seeing it as something that has fallen over is secondary, because a person who knows the language could reasonably not be able to see it in that way. That is, we must be able to see the triangle as triangle before we are able to interpret it as anything else. And we can make a stop there. Anything else is the last bit. And let me go for some quotes here. And just say this is somewhat of a repetition, but in the latter part, next time, we will see how important this is and how it's actually neglected by most interpreters of Wittgenstein. The aspect blind person is not only unable to see the duck when there is a duck rabbit or vice versa. He doesn't understand any meaning whatsoever, or I would say to a very low degree. A comparison I can make here is, think of two persons. One is an adherent of the classical physics. And he would say, either I can only see particles in the world, which is quite common, or possibly I can only see waves. Both of them are actually correct. And in a way, it's not incorrect to only see one. Maybe the problem lies in the before. Before you spot it and it sort of collapsed to one aspect only. The aspect blind never had that going from the implicit to the explicit. There is nothing going on between aletheia and theia. It's a bit like the Enlightenment, and the other person, the proponent on quantum physics, He understands the view of the classical physicist, and it's not wrong. It is just another complete dimension that the classical physicist can't even grasp. Because to grasp it, you need to be sensitive to aspect. Otherwise, it is impossible to be understood. We have a quote here on page 2 at the very end of the third paragraph. So what is this? Listen very carefully. What it's given here by the author and by Wittgenstein is only hints. They are intended to open up your understanding. What sort of decides what sort of aspect is predominant, or how they turn up and how they relate to each other. It's at 7, the criteria for knowing that someone does in fact sees the different aspects of an image. This is page 2, yeah. Is based on what Wittgenstein calls fine shades of behavior. These subtleties in intonation, phrasing, remember Rudolf Pfeiffer, and remember that in the prosody tonality of language, all the abstract shades are hidden or enclosed. These subtleties express a familiarity that comes from not just understanding that the image can be used as multiple things. That's the important phrase. But from actually seeing it as one thing and then another. And also having access, I would say, to the before it's settled, when it's in the superposition, or when Roger Federer is just hitting the ball at Wimbledon. The next page, we have a very important pointer. Fourth line, the first paragraph. A rule for Wittgenstein is a standard that governs a practice, where practice should not be taken as a single action, but rather as an institution. I would translate that, think of myriads of actions, myriads of practices. It is no local reality like classical physics. It's global. Therefore, it's way beyond any ability to put it in explicit format. It's beyond that. It's too great. We cannot hold these rules in our hands. We cannot make them explicit, not because they are unpronounceable or too complex. It's just, it takes the whole world. And whatever you say, it will not cover that. You can still understand it because you do it. but you cannot express it. And that is not a deficit, neither in the world nor in language. As you can see further down in the third paragraph, so we can rightly say that we understand a meaning of a word only when we have correctly used it over a period of time. And I suggest a repetition, imitation, saying it, and this is incredibly important, differently, or thinking it differently every time. It is not same in any identity idea. That is to say, the criteria for understanding a word is consistently correct application. So a word can never be correct or incorrect. It's a scale that depends on how much you used it, how skilled you are, what situation, for what reason, and those myriads of things that we cannot cover in explicit rule. And it still leaves room for misapplication. Remember what we said in the Goldfarb article of the distorted child who continued the series after 1000 with 1004, 1008, 1012. Misapplication is possible. Next page. So line 6 or 7. This cannot be expressed enough. That is, there are ambiguous cases in which one word can mean several different things. And we, in understanding the word, take its meaning as such and such in a certain case. I think you can see now ambiguity is a necessity to have any meanings to the words. In a monosemic world, there wouldn't be any meanings to any word. It would be a stalemate, static. It simply wouldn't work, and it's an impossibility. And this, of course, is the deeper meaning of the duck rabbit. Several opposing meanings, as in quantum physics. The wave and the particle are the most opposing ones. They are the only ones that are capable of expressing one meaning. And as we mentioned many times earlier, latest now with the New Jerusalem, is that for the heaven to have any meaning, it needs its opposing pair. It needs its complementarity. This is the lesson from quantum mechanics about how words work, because in the end, it's a matter of words. Kalle Lundahl, more than welcome to join here.
Thank you, Hans. Let's check out footnote 18. This is not exactly true. The German word that Wittgenstein uses, sondern, does not mean till. It means something equivalent to the English word but, as a direct translation would not have worked. Hans Comp, the translator of the edition of Philosophical investigations being used. Substitute the German for an equally ambiguous English word. I find it interesting. And in the English text here, we have, for instance, gas drawer. And the famous box, the ambiguity of box. You don't see the contents of a box before you open it.
No, exactly.
And I wanted to highlight another thing. Primarily, there was a good quotation. We have to understand the quotation from Wittgenstein here on page 7 in my PDF. Wittgenstein says that it is only if the word has a primary sense for you that you use it in the secondary one. And the example used was Tuesday is lean and Wednesday is fat. And you know what fat means. It's not usually used about weekdays.
Yes, exactly.
Even though we have to, of course, underline that primary and secondary sense can be mixed also, or it's not always clear what is the secondary and primary sense. But I think that this is the general rule of something else I would also like to mention is one last thing, experienced. Let me see, experience. Didn't we have the word experienced? No, it was not this. Let me see the next one. Here. And I like this phrase. Wittgenstein comes from the fact that he believes that in certain cases we experience the meaning of words. So words are not somewhere there in the Platonic world, but is here with us.
We do that.
We have memories about them and so forth.
Definitely. It's a way of doing, and we also know from neurolinguistic and so on that it loses its meaning if we don't do it properly. Language is losing its sense. I think that's a modern phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And another thing, I had to come with this article rather abruptly because of lack of time. But there was one article that it was hinted in the title that Wittgenstein is ordaining mysticism. And why was that? Well, because he says, or he shows, that there is a lot of things that cannot be explained or expressed. And that is in itself a big misunderstanding. Just because it cannot be talked about doesn't mean that it is so to speak unclear or mystical or not shared. Actually, most things that are shared cannot be talked about. Just because the world is ambiguous, it's a way of softening up our myopia in understanding. So the duck rabbit comes in there and it softens everything up, and we understand, aha, actually the most clearest things cannot be talked about, and that is not a defect on either the world or the words nor the understanding of Wittgenstein.
Okay, let's end here. This great paper by Davies from University of Toronto.
Yes, thank you very much. And I just put in, I know you're in a hurry, But do compare this aspect line person to a left hemisphere dominant person. In the left hemisphere, only the things that you can talk about, express and put on paper or orally handle are real.
Yes, and speaking of that, I absolutely think that the person who thinks with the right side of the brain, as Mackelkrist would say, would see them as both duck and rabbit.
Yeah.
Perhaps he would do as Wittgenstein says he would use the word now. Now I see it as a duck, now I see it as a duck. Even though perhaps the word now is not even necessary in this case.
No,
You simply see it.
Exactly, Kalle. The word now is not even necessary. Well, okay, I leave it to you. Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming in, listening in, and have a very pleasant morning, afternoon, or day, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.